Hello and welcome to this week's episode of #Leadership What's on Your Mind. Remember, our aim is to level up your leadership journey by speaking to amazing people with amazing stories and experts in their field. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe on the YouTube channel and follow us on your podcast provider. So today I have the privilege and we are speaking to Helen. How are you doing, Helen?
I'm okay. I'm good. It's Friday.
yeah, exactly. So I'm really looking forward to this. And we know each other through the Institute of Directors, and we're on the Cheshire branch ambassadors. Our illustrious leader, Richard Huxley, has been on a couple of episodes before. I know he's an avid listener, so he'll laugh and chuckle at that comment. But you've got an amazing story, and hence why we connected in the first place. And I think from the conversations we've had, I know that you're going to add value through your storytelling to the audience and add little snippets of information that will make people stop and think, which is the whole idea. So as I hit the 20-minute timer, for people who don't know who you are, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Crikey, yeah. So Helen Tonks, known now for being co-founder of a business with my husband called Hydraulics Online, which, as the name suggests, is a hydraulic engineering business. Mark and I started the business from scratch in 2004 with a blank sheet of paper and just £900 spare cash. We are a micro business, but punching above our weight, trading all over the world, having supplied to 130 countries, and recognised as such by the Department for International Trade as export champions. What else can I tell you? I've recently started at the request of Manchester Metropolitan University to be involved with formal business mentoring, because I would like to say I am known for being a real authentic example of what can happen even in a micro business. And I'm a mum to 7. So yeah, time flies, whether I'm having fun or not, basically.
Exactly. So I think from even that introduction, we know that you're a fascinating person with loads of different things that add value. And you mentioned about the mentoring. That's something that I will probably ask you later on in regards to what you get from that as well, in regards to leveling up, because I know the little things that I've done has been really useful. So yeah, excellent. So let's start with the questions. So obviously, what #leadership, what's on your mind? What comes to your mind when you hear the word leadership?
Well, leadership for me, in the perfect sense, would be somebody who's got a really, really clear vision for the future. And takes others on that journey, even, you know, engages them in defining what the detail of that vision needs to look like. Somebody who is really comfortable and even embraces change and is kind of constantly on their toes. One of my favorite sort of expressions, a famous quote, is that success breeds complacency, complacency breeds failure, only the paranoid survive. So I think being a leader has to be about having a healthy dose of paranoia, but also recognizing and a huge amount of empathy that not everybody is comfortable with change, and you really have to bring others on that journey. It would be somebody who absolutely knows that they haven't got all the answers and really acknowledges the fact that they have got weaknesses too. And gets those weaknesses out there and invites others to kind of fill that gap. So yeah, that would be
awesome.
Perfect sort of leadership in
yeah, I like that. You've added some things that have been mentioned before, but also some things that haven't been mentioned before. I love the fact you put in there about the change, because how true is that? And it's not always, and I love everybody's different answers, because everybody is different, and it's not just one blanket statement, is it? So I love it. So staying with you personally, whether it's on reflection or whether it was a light bulb moment at the time, and where do you think your leadership journey started?
Probably the very moment that I started working. So as if I look back on my career to date, there's been 3, if not sort of 4 chapters to my career. So I graduated from the University of Bristol, joined Barclays Bank on a fast track management program. So it was all about leadership and getting you to that sort of position really, really quickly. So I was literally thrown in at the deep end regularly over a 4.5-5 year period. And it was a few years ago now, so technology didn't play such a big part. There was more human decision making involved, etc. So I can think of many examples when I would literally be leading a team of people and I was by far the youngest person involved. So I guess that was a key point where it came naturally anyway, but the whole collaboration, relationship, team bit, and always focusing on that, and never at the never focusing on the task at the expense of the humans. That's something that I've always really sort of carried through with me, because as the leader, you aren't necessarily the one that's the expert on a particular issue or direction or whatever it may be. So probably right from the very beginning. And then, without going off at a tangent too early, maybe, I then kind of stepped away from that completely and starting the business from scratch, stepping away from a very, very successful corporate career and all the security that came with it. So I then say there'd be a period of my career when I didn't feel like I was a leader at all. In fact, I was just the wife in the background of the business, doing the typical bookkeeping, accounting things, thinking that I wouldn't be taken seriously if I was known to be the wife. And it therefore took me 9 years for me to change my name at work after we were married, because I thought if people saw that we both had the same name in a very small family business, it just wouldn't sort of help the brand that I was trying to build. So yeah, went from one extreme to another, really.
I love that. I'm going to pick you up on one thing though, and see whether there's some earlier, because you said about when you were dropped in the deep end with fast track management, leadership skills, etc. You said it came naturally anyway. Yeah. Why do you think, is there something that's further on before you went into your career that the reason why you thought, or you think that it was a natural, obviously you've got to be selected to fast track. So why do you think that was in your tool bag? I talk about tool bag of the military, the sense of like putting all those skills in your toolbox. So you might have had those earlier on. Is there anywhere that you might thought of that was naturally came to you?
I don't know. I guess I can only answer it in terms of the feedback that I get from others. I am naturally open, really inclusive, have absolutely no ego. No, I've not got the monopoly on bright ideas. I just always want to do a good job and make every day sort of count. So I'm a naturally, I'm confident. I know I'm a smart lady, but I don't profess to know it all. So I'm very much about, team and engaging that wider sort of collective and perspective on something. So I don't know, people have just always kind of gravitated to me and been very happy to work with me. And I say with me rather than under me or for me, because it's with me.
Awesome. I think you're right. From my perspective, knowing you for the short time that I've known you, it was something I was talking about this week, actually, about the value of people skills, of, you said there, being open, being able to have a conversation with somebody and have that confidence without it being arrogant, all that sort of thing. And again, it definitely comes across that. So I've got a question that came up from an audience person, somebody that listens to the podcast. And they were saying it would be great to ask people who their first leadership influence was, which I thought was really interesting, because obviously we asked you about how far it goes back, and people normally go quite a long time back. But when did the role model influence, does somebody jump out that was actually quite impactful on your leadership journey now? And again, it might be on reflection, or you realised it at the time.
There would be a couple, actually, but an influence for all the wrong reasons. It was how not to lead. So and I won't mention names because it's a small world, and who knows who might view this or share it and say, are they talking about you? There was one female corporate manager at Barclays, so that's still a many years ago, who, to be fair, was very much in the minority, being a female in that position, but it was kind of the seniority that I was destined for and beyond. And she was just, I don't know what I'm allowed to say. She wasn't pleasant. I think she thought she needed to be aggressive to get on, and she really rubbed people up the wrong way. And then I was thinking actually only the other day in the run up to this, I've been bullied at work and I hadn't recognised it as such. But on leaving Barclays, I then went to work for a big insurance company that I will remain nameless, and worked for a chap who was responsible for basically bringing new partnerships on board to set up new delivery channels for the business. And I was head of implementation. So my role was to help him court prospective partners and get involved in all the detail of planning that would be needed before a partnership agreement and heads of terms would be agreed. And then having won the deal, I had to make it all happen. So that role in the end would see me regularly leading kind of cross-functional teams of up to 100 people over whom I arguably had no direct sway or influence, because they were in different functions of the business, of everything from finance and actuaries through to call centres and marketing, everything in between. And my boss, he was shocking. He was so task focused, and people would complain about him behind his back. So I was almost like the piggy in the middle. And I remember he once said to me, "But Helen," he says, "I don't care. I'm not here to get Christmas cards." And I was like, "But you need me. You're expecting me to jump through hoops, and I can only deliver if we've got everyone behind us engaged." Anyway, it came to a head one very early flight to Dublin from Birmingham. We were taking off at 6 a.m. I was 5 months pregnant with my first child. It was a tiny propeller-engined plane, and within 5 minutes of being airbound, he'd got me in tears. I don't know if it was my hormones or what, but he had crossed a line. So there followed a very awkward day. We were in each other's company for about 14 hours and I couldn't bear looking at him. He just repulsed me by this stage. I'd had enough. I got home late night, went into work early the next morning, booked a private meeting room, had literally on a flip chart by the time he arrived. So I was in super early, got my bullet points because that's the way he worked. And I basically told him to sit down and listen. And I delivered this monologue with no emotion, because he didn't do emotion. And he just sat there in silence, at which point I thought, well, this is going one of two ways. And he basically said, sorry.
Wow.
And he said, if I've done this to you, I know I've really messed up and I've got to change.
Wow.
And yeah, that was 5 months into being pregnant. So we only worked together for another couple of months or so by the time I went on mat leave, but I was still at the photocopier at 8 o'clock on the last Friday before Christmas, my last working day. And when I returned after mat leave, he'd left that business. So our paths never had to cross again, but he was a prime example of, his intentions were good. He wanted what was right for the business, but oh my gosh, he walked all over people. He had no regard for humans that he was working with.
The delivery was wrong. It's really interesting you picked that up, and we sort of, I told you before we jumped on, we were going to ask that question, but a lot of people across all 80, nearly 90 episodes now have said predominantly that they've learned to be who they are now as a leader by seeing the people who don't do it very well. And it was quite interesting we've picked up that thread, because you would think, from my perspective, I was thinking that the people who were really good leaders were being surrounded by great leadership, and it was just like a nice happy path to being a great leader, and it's not. And it's that taking that on board and then implementing it yourself moving forward. So amazing. So can you share some of the obviously your journey? And again, we've got 7 minutes left. I know it flies by. Can you share some of the learning points and some of the added value for the audience that you've learned in your business now, dealing with people, dealing with stakeholders? You mentioned then about dealing with people that aren't necessarily, I know this is going back to your previous role, aren't necessarily your direct reports. Some of the things that you've learned over the time that you've been in your leadership journey that might get people who are listening to think and add to their toolbox.
Okay, well, the first, and you might hear this often, but I've always said there's no such thing as business to business or business to consumer. It's always human to human, and I'm absolutely passionate about that. And I think the other thing I've really learned is that, I mean, I'm a non-technical woman in a very technical male-dominated industry, and that is one of the main reasons why I sort of hid in the background of the business for so long, raising our ridiculously big family and working part-time hours. But I almost had like an epiphany moment when we won our first business award 4 years ago, and I was standing on the stage in tears, of which I'm regularly reminded still, because it really, really mattered. And that was in the moment where I thought, I kind of almost valued what I was doing myself for the business, because, you know, it was me that had created so much of the collateral and the story that we were talking about. I always say my husband is the hydraulics and I'm the everything else. And the reason I say that is that, you know, there were so many plates that I was spinning and so many hats that I was wearing, you know, across finance, marketing, operations, legal, everything. I was making all that happen to create this engine that constantly appealed to customers needing hydro engineering equipment, so that the sales team had got a regular line of inquiries, and I was doing it. And I realized that you don't necessarily have to be a subject matter expert in the technical aspect of the business to be able to do everything else. And in fact, being a woman in a male-dominated industry was my superpower. And it was fine, because it meant I could ask what others would see as really fundamental questions. And then they'd go, oh, well, we don't actually know. And I would just come at it with a completely different perspective. And often be in a room full of technical guys asking a question, and they were going, oh yeah, wow. And I'm like, but it's not rocket science, you know, basically. So yeah, I think recognize that actually being the kind of, in many ways, the least qualified in a situation can sometimes be to your advantage, because you do really get to dig into those fundamental aspects that never otherwise get challenged, really.
Do you know what? I love the fact that you mentioned that, because I just really quickly, my perception of coming out of the military, I was thinking I'll have no chance. I've got no business experience. How do I get in? And it's turned 180, because people value exactly what you just said then, that you don't have any bias. We'll ask the questions that people have just been nodding along to for so long. They don't realize and they don't see the gaps. And there's so much value in having somebody external. I've listened to another great podcast recently about the fact of naivety is a superpower, because you'll go in and just ask the questions and be interested and intrigued about what's going on around you, and you'll get people being like, oh yeah, nobody's asked that for 5 years, why haven't we addressed that? Really,
I think that's why it works for the mentoring as well, because you basically get dropped into a business and see everything, warts and all, and you do get the opportunity to say, but why, or have you ever thought of, or, you know, whatever it may be. So it's really, really powerful. Really powerful.
I was going to ask you about the mentoring, because this is something that is on my radar at the minute. And I asked somebody a couple of weeks ago about what they got from an experience, because on the face of it, you're doing the giving value, giving time, giving your expertise, giving your stories of how your perspectives to help. What do you get? Do you get anything from that?
Always.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Always, because, you know, there's so much about business that is common across business, regardless of the industry, etc., etc. So there's always a little bit of a gem, a little light bulb moment. It might be fine tuning or dotting an I or crossing a T for myself, but there's always something that I will get from every session. And sometimes that can as much be anything about the fact that affirming that the decisions that I'm making on a daily basis for our own business are right. So it's about knowing that I can really trust my gut instinct, and that it's not just gut. Actually, there's a lot going on in there. I'm drawing on a lot of other experience, but almost to give me more confidence as well in the direction that, you know, I'm taking our business. But it's two-way inspiration and learning every single time. And as much as anything, Stuart, I just love it. It gives me such an energy and spring in my step, knowing that I've helped unlock somebody else's thinking, or giving them a clearer head that means they're going to sleep better, or just giving them the chance to go, it's I love that. I think I've kind of found my vocation really.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, you're right. And again, I think I've mentioned this on the podcast a long time ago, but when I do speak to people about when they might be a little bit stuck, I always say about the above and below the line. So go below and mentor and give your experience. You don't realize how much you've done.
Yeah.
You can help others, and then support people at the same level as you, but then also go above and go and speak to the people who have been there, done it, got the t-shirt, and it's a really good so on that note as well, like, you're an amazing person to follow on LinkedIn, because there's a lot of things going on at the minute, isn't there? So could you, we're almost at the end, but could you let us know, like, what, there's quite a few things that have gone on, awards, and like, what does the future look like? Give us a finishing 30 seconds.
Okay, so as a business, Hydraulics Online has recently been shortlisted for the High Sheriff's Awards for Enterprise, which will take place in April in conjunction with the University of Chester. So that's that. I've finally sort of gone public, so to speak, on the mentoring work that Manchester Met invited me to get involved in with. And that has gone down an absolute storm. It seems that everybody was waiting for me to take this very natural next step. And yeah, then a complete curveball, I've been added to the Northern Power Women Power List this year. So didn't see that coming, but I'm thrilled because it just gives me a bigger sort of platform to open doors for others, because that's what so much of business and life is about. It's opening doors and giving others a leg up.
Yeah, amazing. And we'll continue to mention that on the Institute of Director meetings that we have on a regular basis. It's going to be, we're going to have you as a guest speaker definitely very soon. So Helen, thank you so much for your time today. Guys, that's the end of the podcast. 20 minutes flies by, and especially when you've got like-minded people on and good people sharing good stories. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button on the YouTube channel. Follow us on your podcast provider. Every Wednesday, 6 a.m, we've got an amazing guest coming on, and we've got some phenomenal people lined up for the rest of the year. So thank you again, Helen.
Thank you. Thanks,
and we'll see you all next week. Take care. Bye.